I couldn't Google or think about, finding, and it's just kind of like, I don't even know I want it yet, so,
Sure.
I'll just kind of run into weird fantasy figures, like, bootleg He-Man toys or something like that, that I find interesting, and so this was kind of always a crossover, kind of like, kind of a Death Dealer-ish Frazetta
Sure.
looking character, and I like Frazetta a lot too, so, yeah, it was just, I was in San Diego recently, and was checking out a toy store down there. I think it was like Toy Addicts or something like that. But
Wow.
yeah, it was the HasLab. It was like the Katana or something like that. It's that big the skiff from Return of the Jedi.
Yep.
They did that crowdfunding thing for those who just got released, and they just got one in, and the box was like hilariously, it's like 6 foot long or something like that. So I went to the back and was looking, and they had a bunch of like. It was kind of like my shelf. It was like Harryhausen, like Gentle Giant stuff, and Mego, and then they had like a horse, and it was this guy on the horse, which I didn't even care really about the horse necessarily, but they had it all together and had the shield, and yeah, it was just kind of a really it was a cool moment to kind of track that down.
Did the store know how valuable it was?
Not really. I mean, they had most of them. They had like Aragorn and Frodo and stuff like that, but it was really funny because they didn't really understand it. They're like, it's just a weird plastic horse toy, kind of thing. So yeah, it's kind of I like that more than fighting on eBay or trying to pay crazy money for. Like right now, I'm looking for like Star Wars, like the lightsabers. They were made from Graflex like camera parts. So whenever I'm out at state sales, there's always people with camera parts everywhere, and I'm looking for like the flash attachment because you can convert them into actual lightsabers. So yeah, it's just kind of like, oh, I don't want a Hasbro replica one. I want to kind of like have a customizer take this original one and make it how they made the original ones and that kind of thing. So
yeah, there's the the first Star Wars action figures. There's the vinyl Cape Jawa, which everyone talks about, which before the cloth, and that was super valuable and rare. And people were making forgeries of it by taking the Obi-Wan cape and cutting it off. There's differences to it, but people were still trying to pass it off. So it's important. It's very beneficial to know that you're not getting a forgery of that or like a fake one, or
yeah, the float test for
is by buying it on a card. And I knew this collector in Italy who bought one on a card, and then he just opened it up and put it on the shelf because he wanted to have it on the shelf. So,
yeah, I can respect that.
Yeah, he paid through the nose for it. So, okay, so I'll tell this. I could talk for 2 hours just about this toy. The Shogun Warriors are something that you may know. Those were hero robots from the 70s. And when they were first released in 1973, they planned to make store displays of villains that the heroes faced. The first 2 Jumbo Machinders were Mazinger Z and Kamen Rider V3. So they made 2 Mazinger Z villains and 2 Kamen Rider V3 villains. And the Shogun Warriors, the Jumbo Machinders, were made out of polyethylene, which is shampoo bottles. But the villains, the store displays, were made out of vinyl. And there was such interest in the villains that they decided at the 11th hour to make them as products. So they released them in very limited numbers. And then in the second series, they released 4, and then they released 6. And one of those 6 villains in the second series was this one, Garada K7, which is one of the first 2 villains in the first episode of Mazinger Z. And he has a skull head and these sickle horns. And this is 1973, when toys are aimed squarely at kids. So it's not like today when we're thinking about adult, toys aimed at adults and scary toys and McFarlane and all that. So they said, this is too scary, we don't want to make it. And they repainted it. This is not the paint scheme of the character, to make it sort of look like a bug and hide the fact that it was a skull. So I sort of knew about this, and I looked for it for 13 years. And I went to Japan 7 times, and everyone thought it was nuts. They didn't think it was really made. They thought it was just a picture of prototypes. And in 1999, a specimen was found. In 2001, the Bandai Museum found one that they were going to throw away. And then in 2006, after looking at it for 13 years, one came up for auction, and I did win it for $15,500. And so that was the third one that was known, and one surfaced earlier this year that was broken. The horns were ripped off in the back, and it was listed as junk, and that went for $52,000. So, there's no joy. It's not the thrill of the hunt for me. I love having it. And then last year, Go Nagai was at the expo, and I got to have a private meeting with him. And the value of toys are decreased in vinyl kaiju if you write the name on the foot. That was a common thing that kids would do. But I don't think this will be the case, because I had Go Nagai write his name on the foot. So that was that. And in talking to Go Nagai, he told me he didn't collect toys when he was creating all of his characters. He created Devilman, Cutie Honey, Get a Robo, Grandizer. These were huge worldwide phenomenons. And he deeply regretted it. He said, I was too busy making manga and anime, and the toys that came out were wonderful, and I wish I had collected them. I thought I was going to show him this, and he would say, like, oh yeah, I have 10 of those at home. And he was really excited to see it. This sort of gets on to, we sort of opened this conversation about, the three of you making toys, and I think that's a common thing with serious collectors. They get sort of grabbed by the awesomeness of these. And there was sort of this, I would call it a dueling aesthetic in the 90s, especially with vinyl kaiju, of sort of a retro aesthetic of like Marusan and Bullmark, and the modern aesthetic of Bandai, which would make like new Godzilla figures every year, and they would sort of pride themselves on the realism that they would have. Like, this looks like the '64 Godzilla, and this one is from Monster Zero, and all that. And again, I make no judgment of people's collecting taste. And there's a lot. McFarlane getting super real in the 90s was a big thing. Like Stan Winston Studios started releasing, amazing realistic action figures in the 90s. And it still sort of continues today, but I still think that there is this dueling aesthetic of retro versus realism. And I think the designer vinyl craze is more generally on the side of retro. And I think it's great to see the retro Bullmark style alive, even if it's not Bullmark, even if it's all of your respective companies, and that's exciting, and it's super creative to me. We live in this era of everything being franchises and, trying to build up theme parks, and you go to something like Designer Con, and everyone's doing, these are my designs, and these are my creatures, and if they're from something, they're from something really obscure, like the one that you released with two heads. That's from Jack the Giant Killer from 62.
Galligantus.
Yes,
Yeah.
And it's a great toy, and it's great to see it. And there's a lot of creativity that I think has come from sort of the spike in toy collecting that began in the 90s. And now we're in this wonderful age of technology of people being able to make their own toys and design their toys digitally. And there's this guy who is sort of designing stuff with Tinkercad, and he's doing a Big O toy. And he is doing a toy of Diberon, a Jumbo Machinder. And then look at this. He's 3D printed his own Jet Jaguar and his own, that's the Kamen Rider V3 that I mentioned before. And he's doing, and this is a great thing, with technology and art being combined. I look at that Jet Jaguar and I'm saying, I gotta contact this guy. I gotta, see if I can have him print me one and buy it, and then I gotta commission you to paint it, or whatever. All of those ideas that are sparking people to want to collect and be creative, I think is a wonderful thing. And it's an exciting time to be at Kaiju Con and be a part of all this. And then, sort of another thing On the flip side of that is something that I want to talk about. I talk about those villains that Popey made in '73 and Karate K7 as the rarest of them. And there's growing concern of toy forgeries going on. And that Spartan K5, and there's 3 of them right next to each other, which is awfully suspicious. And we're seeing more and more pictures online of auctions and high prices. And a collector in Belgium did this comparison, counting the rivets on Spartan K5. And there is a difference, and there are differences in Machinder villains in weight. And the fake Machinder villains, the forgeries that are hitting the market, are heavier. And there's a lot of collectors in Asia now who are have a lot of money. There's a lot of money in China right now, and they're buying stuff that could very well be fake. And they don't seem to care as much as I would expect them to.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So why would they, if they're going to that extent, to make it look as much as possible like the original, why wouldn't the rivets all be the same?
Well, they've been able to sell it at, this is a few years old, so I'm not sure if it was 3D printed or hand sculpted or whatever. But maybe they just thought that no one would go to the trouble of counting the rivets.
Okay.
Which is a common mistake. And then here's a 3D sculpt that someone did of Karate K7. And just you guys, you're dealing with toys. Are you coming across forgeries, or is this something that's on your radar?
The only forgery stuff I run into is mainly like Star Wars, vintage Star Wars Kenner. Like people can fake the weapons and that sort of thing pretty well, but yeah.
Yeah, or like loose toys suddenly have a box now,
Right.
because they're able to fake the stickers and all of the paperwork.
In the designer side, there's been recently a lot of fakes made from a specific collector in Asia, in China specifically, who basically went from being a massive collector to basically making fakes and selling them, and it's like very obvious, and then even down to like trying to paint them, but he basically sells them as like cheap knockoffs
Right.
of the toys, and if you put one next to the other, you can tell that he basically took a blank, made a mold of that, so it's just a little bit bigger.
Right.
And the vinyl itself, the quality is comparable. I can tell the difference, but I can see how somebody wouldn't. So it's kind of an interesting thing, because he's basically targeting certain creators that are on the higher end of things, and basically just I don't know if he's trying to devalue it or whatever, what's going on, but he's moving them.
It's just, with this trend that you guys are all a part of we're talking about blanks for vinyls, or repainting vinyl kaiju toys, or designer vinyls. You can have a celebrity artist, do a paint job on either over a production model or a blank now. That seems to be becoming more and more of a thing. And you can have forgeries not only of the toy, but of the artist who did their custom paint job on it.
Yeah, I was just going to say real quick, I think what Juan's talking about is like the difference between like a real Fendi and a fake Fendi.
Yeah.
Right.
So some of the toys have reached that status where they're so rare, they sell out instantly, but there's so much pent-up demand that collectors are willing to buy a bootleg version of it, just so they can Instagram the photo, right? And say like,
Right.
hey, I got it, you
Yeah,
know?
there's
So-
also like another trend, which is like basically acquiring blanks and having your favorite customizer paint them. And
Which is a good thing.
yeah, it's something that I personally, I don't do.
Mhm.
I've taken a number of trips to Japan this year basically to go and meet with certain creators and basically ask permission. That's something specific to
Sure.
me. Because I find it somewhat disrespectful in a certain way. Like it's almost like an American thing to say like I bought something so I can do whatever I want to it.
Right.
But then it creates a lot of problems for certain individuals later, as they, let's say if they want to enhance their career as like a toy customizer or whatever else,
Mhm.
because among certain groups you get sort of like blacklisted, or certain other creators are like, no man, you've been like messing with my stuff, basically trying to like borrow a ladder, essentially, like taking somebody's toy that's like, oh, that so-and-so's famous, I'm gonna paint their blanks to therefore make my profile, you know, risen, where I'll travel to Asia and basically meet with them, and they'll be like, oh, I like what you do, here's some stuff, you're sanctioned. You're good to go.
Did you say borrow a ladder?
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
I've never heard that.
I think I probably stole it from some movie.
But Tom and I were talking about that. Like, he was saying, do I paint other people's toys? And I said, sometimes, but it's usually an official collab.
Right.
So we'll split the sale, like 50-50. So say it's $120, he gets 60, I get 60. But it's official, like I'm working with the guy. But say if a random collector, like, gives me like one of your toys, I would feel obligated to at least say, hey, are you okay with this? Like, or is that gonna, are you gonna not be okay with it? Because I don't wanna just start painting on other people's toys and, whatever, making money off of it if I don't know that creator, so.
It's all very interesting to me. I mean, who would have thought like 15 years ago that like sketch covers for comics would be the huge thriving culture that they are now? And I just think something is gonna happen with that, with designer vinyls and custom paintings. And, I hope it works out. We got a few minutes left. Should we open it up to any questions? Okay, you, right there.
Okay, it's a great panel. I've learned a lot about you three, and I thought I knew stuff about you three. Hey, so I've got a million questions I could ask. One thing, what do you guys think about this trend from Mandarake recently of selling something and then altering the price afterwards so that it looks like it's sold for a lot more than it did, which I am seeing happen all the time. So people look at it and go, why did someone pay like $2,000 for that? But in reality, it was $1,100 the night before.
Wow.
Yeah, there's definitely in you specifically and a bunch of us, we've been through this a number of times to see the toy bubble burst in numerous iterations, and this show is actually unique to me because this is probably the first time in a long time where I don't actually know everybody in the room's first names, and that's actually a good thing for me because I'm sitting here trying to look at the market, right, and something that you're talking about where when I'm in Asia, I'm like, oh, this bubble is gonna burst. Like, this is really, really bad. I was at the most recent Mandrake Fest, and it's like the first hour, one booth is slammed, and the rest of it is just like everybody's sitting there, and it's just like very like sales aren't as crazy as you think they would be. Like when you're looking on the internet, you're thinking that we're having the time of our lives, and
We are, aren't we?
and so
Certainly on this panel.
And so I think it's something that they're probably analyzing through sales internally, and they can see where things are going. Like I have an idea when I'm walking through Mandrake where I think I know what the price is, and then I'm like, yeah, this is way less than I thought it would be, and I think they're motivated to sell, to just, obviously move product, but they also want to keep the image that collecting is thriving. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, eBay and Yahoo Japan aren't perfect, but they're still the best sort of gauge long-term to looking at prices and trends. Like looking at bookmark and closed auctions is, for things that you're interested in, is useful. And I have never heard any sort of, like heritage auctions for comic art, they're really sort of transparent on what things close at, and there's no suspicion on that. But yes, it's just good to say that out loud, that Mandarake might be up to, bad or fraudulent exposure for what their things are selling for, and, talk about it and just widen your eyes to the overall market to try and get a better idea of what the actual value is. Robert, yes?
So I had a question, an overall kind of philosophical question for collectors. So way back when, saw an article in a Giant Robot magazine, this dates me a little bit, but I think you told Eric in your interview that when he was looking at your machine collection, he said, oh, I'm going to be buried with these things, which I thought was kind of awesome. at the time, and I sold him actually, but I was kind of wondering, I thought about this a little bit, like, if you have the road, say, 30 years from now, what am I gonna do with my collection? Because I don't have kids, so it's like, have you guys contemplated, are you gonna give it to a museum, are you gonna donate, are you gonna give it to a collector friend? I'm just kind of curious as to like, if you contemplated like, yes, at the end of the day, I have this, collection of whatever, 3,000 items that are worth a ton of money, and they're awesome and rare, and what are you gonna do with them?
It's a tricky question, and that, article was over 20 years ago. And it's hard to hold on to collections, especially when prices appreciate and, you're able to afford stuff, and then all of a sudden it gets to a price, and you got to slow down, and then you got to stop. The prices for machinders have really skyrocketed, and I haven't bought one in a while, and I've sold a few, and life throws curveballs at you, and you got to do what you got to do. So I don't think I will be buried with my toy collection, but I can't answer what I'll do with it, what the future holds for it.
Trash fire.
Well, yeah, I'm kind of like Tom. I mean, I'm an older collector, and so now I'm really starting to think about this. And my son it's not his aesthetic. He collects other things, and I think part of me wants to have a really huge party / auction, kind of like what Peekaboo Gallery's doing, but while I'm still alive, and just offload it, just have it go out to other collectors. There's a few key pieces like the Red Ultraman that I think I will keep till my deathbed, but yeah, for the most part, again, the whole Marie Kondo thing. I think I've lived with my collection for 30 plus years, and
Marie Kondo, it's
doesn't spark joy as much. So
you just hear about collections getting thrown out by mothers all the time, and people are plenty good at understanding what yard sales, eBays, and trash bins are. I don't think we need to have such a ritualized. Marie Kondo makes it seem like you're not getting rid of as much stuff as you really want to, and you need me to tell you that. And if Marie Kondo, had a Karate K7, that would have been in the trash.
I actually got lit up in an interview once because I had told them that minimalism's for poor people. That didn't go over too well.
Well, minimalism, it's for everyone, and that's why self-help gurus promote it, because it's advice that everyone can take, and it doesn't feel like you're excluding anyone.
Yeah, if you're broke.
When you say it. Yeah, you're broke, yes. Any other questions? You up there.
So what do you think separates because there's two different types of artists, right? There's the ones that actually like people being able to modify toys, maybe do a custom paint job, and then those other ones that are really sensitive to people modifying their stuff. Because a lot of the toys out there, they just don't have good paint jobs.
I mean, I just ask, if I like something a lot, I let the artist know, that I care for their toy. I spoke with Mark about something upcoming that I really like something he was working on, and
I said no.
yeah. So it's one of those things. I just you put it out there, and if they don't want you to mess with it, you don't. You always hope for the future.
Can I paint your Red Ultraman green?
Yeah.
Or $5,000.
Well, that's a whole other thing, is when people paint on vintage toys, it's just break them over the coals.
I've actually done that.
Sacrilege. Anyone else? I think we're out of time. No, it's 4:34.
I have another question.
Okay, I'll take
Do you
it.
think that the demographic has changed between toy collectors, or as far as age, and maybe
Well,
certain countries see
Fat old guys?
It's, no,
Yeah, right.
I mean, there's sort of this understanding of a study of when people are able to be the most nostalgic is after they get out of college and join the workforce and before they have a family. Because that's when they have the most freedom, all of a sudden they have disposable income, and And that's when people tend to go the craziest with their collecting, and then they have less resources to do so once they start, getting married and having kids. But I think that's kind of changed in the last 10 years, where, because the internet allows for such easy access to continue a collection, and because there's sort of such transparency in figuring out what something is worth now, it's far less mysterious, even with whatever Mandarake is doing. So people can feel like, oh, well, this is a good price and I should get it. And so I kind of feel like the bailing out age of collecting has risen.
Do you think
in the
that
last
art
years.
toys have helped to bring more collectors out there? The reason I say that is because if you look back maybe like 10 years, a lot of people would kind of be able to get collecting toys are kind of childish, but now it's actually seen as pretty cool because it's another piece of art.
Sure, I mean, there's definitely less of a stigma to it. There's sort of a phrase with collecting that I heard from Matt Alt, who's a co-author on the book that Robert Dubin wrote, Number One Robot, is that what it's called? Super Number One Robot. That with certain types of collecting, the flame burns twice as bright, but for half as long. And I do feel that sometimes you get collectors who are just get into something so hot, and it's really hot right now, and I just want it, and I want it, and they spend and spend and spend, and then they sort of supernova out and unload it fast.
Those are my favorite kind of guys.
Yeah. But I do think designer vinyl has made it cooler and reduced the stigma, but I do feel like I see that trend with designer vinyl collectors more than I see it with vintage toy collectors.
Right. And then there's the whole Funko Pop
Yeah, sure.
stuff, which that's a whole nother panel. But but I see some crossover, like some guys buying from me that like, oh, I like Funko Pop too, and I actually I don't, but
that's
but
the
there's a
game.
little there's a little bleed
Yeah,
over.
you get a little taste, and then you
But then
go on to
but
heroin.
for our stuff, you have to educate them that it's not $5. I can't sell this for $5.
Yeah.
Like literally, I'm making it for $10, and I'm barely making money at selling it for $30 or $40, right? Because it's like they're making hundreds of thousands of pieces in China, and I'm like, struggling with 20 pieces.
But I do think there is a market that does understand that. Yes, you do have to educate, certain people who are coming to your table, but I do think that there's a good thriving market that, is here today. So, I want to thank everyone for coming. We do need to wrap it up. So, thank you so much.